So in this session, we will be talking about new product adoption. So this is a very important area because companies have to constantly introduce new products. They have to have new products in the pipeline in order to survive. And one of the key things that concerns managers is that, okay, once they introduce a new product, how quickly and how easily is it going to be diffused in the market, and what can companies do to make the products easier for customers to adopt? So this slide shows you 6 factors that facilitate the adoption of new products by customers. So an easy way to sort of memorize this model is using the Accord. It's the acronym of ACCORD, Accord, named after the car manufactured by Honda, the Accord model. So the A stands for relative advantage. So the new product compared to the existing product has to have a clear and distinct and significant relative advantage. The next is compatibility. The new product, the more compatible the new product is with the existing product, the easier and faster it's going to be adopted by customers. So what do we mean by compatibility? One good example is if the usage pattern or the way that the new product is used is completely different from the existing product. If the way that the new product has to be used departs from how the old product, the existing product is used, then that's going to make it very hard for customers to adopt the new product because it requires unlearning of the old product and then learning new ways to use the new product. So the more compatible they are, the easier it is for customers to adopt. The third is complexity. So obviously this would suggest that the less complex the new product is compared to the old product, the easier it will be for customers to adopt. If a new product is very complex, that makes it very hard for customers to use and learn. Therefore, it's going to be a barrier or an obstacle for customers to adopt a new product. The fourth would be divisibility. Now, divisibility is when divisibility means experimentation. So when customers can experiment and try the product on a limited basis before they commit to the product, the easier it will be for customers to adopt. So if there are opportunities where customers can try the product or experiment the product, a good example will be the Apple Store. I mean, Apple's products, the new products that they introduce in the market, before customers have to, buy the product, they could play around with the product, touch the product, they can ask questions in the store, in the Apple Store. So this provides a platform for customers to experiment with the product, to play around with the product, to try the product out before they commit to buying. And then the fifth one would be observability, which means that the more observable, the more that other customers can see the product, the easier it will be for customers to adopt the new product. So new products that are more visible in the eyes of other customers, that are typically used in public space as opposed to private space, have a higher chance of being adopted. They're just easier for customers to adopt because other customers will see it, therefore it provides a motivation and incentive for them to adopt the new product, at least have interest in the new product. And then the last is risk. Again, this suggests that if the new product is riskier than the old product, then it'll be a lot more difficult for customers to adopt. Some of these 6 elements, there's a positive correlation. So take the example of risk and complexity. So the more complex it is, the riskier it'll be. So as you can see, these are all kind of interrelated to one another. But at the end of the day, collectively, if the new product is more compatible, if it has a clear and significant relative advantage, if it's less complex, if it can be tried out on if it's divisible, in other words, if it can be tried out on an experimental basis, if it is more observable, and if it has less risk, then there's a greater chance that the new product will be adopted. This shows you the different category of adopters in a market. So when a new product is introduced, typically there are 5 different type of customers that react to the new product. They're innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. And as you go from left to right, this shows you the rate or the time in which customers adopt the new product. So innovators and early adopters are the 2 that adopt the new product the fastest. And then late majority and laggards are people that will only adopt after the dust settles, after they see all the bugs that have been corrected for, and they see other people adopting the product. And these people tend to be risk-averse people that are not willing to take the risk to adopt a new product only until it becomes a mainstream product. And we see that there's kind of like a gap, or what we call the chasm, as you see in the next slide, between the early majority, the early innovators, and the early majority. And that is called the chasm. It's like a valley. And the reason why we call it the chasm is because a lot of new products, actually, if they can't cross the chasm, in other words, if they can't be appealing to the early majority and beyond, then that new product typically has a high chance of dying out, or it will not be appealing to the mass market. So take the example of the iPhone. An iPhone is an innovative new product, typically. People perceive that as an innovative new product. But it has crossed that chasm in the sense that a lot of people in the market, at least in the developed world, they possess the iPhone. So it has been able to cross the chasm, and it has been able to be appealing to the vast majority of customers in a given market. Whereas other cell phones, like Nokia phones or Motorola phones, they really haven't appealed to the mass market yet. So, they really haven't crossed the chasm in that sense. So this slide shows you the importance of crossing the chasms from practicing managers. The director of IBM said, think about the target customers, or how the target customers will use your product. Really try to understand the risks they have to deal with in using your product. Figure out how to help them manage these risks. So if you can manage these risks, try to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and develop the new products. There's a greater chance of crossing the chasm. Or a marketing executive from Motorola suggests our biggest competitor isn't necessarily IBM or Sony. It is the way in which people currently do things. So, what this is saying is, it seems like, this marketing executive from Motorola is underscoring the importance of compatibility. It may not necessarily be our competitors that may be preventing us from going forward. It may be looking at the ways in which people are using our products, doing things, and if we can develop products that are consistent and provide enhanced compatibility, then our products may do well in the market, and it may not necessarily be because of the competition. So, in the remaining of the session, I'd like to talk about the psychology of new product adoption. So, the customers go through a psychological process. In other words, customers do not necessarily follow a rational path in adopting new products. A lot of the way that they think and behave when adopting new products are considered irrational. So from a rational economics perspective, when should consumers adopt a new product? So from a rational perspective, it may be fairly easy for marketers and developers, new product developers, to think about when customers will adopt their new products. But that perspective that they may hold may not necessarily be aligned and consistent with the way that customers think about when they adopt new products. So